So I really made some people mad for calling this gun cheap in the past, and they're going to be vindicated today because today it is the more expensive of the two. We're talking about the Canik TP9SF Elite versus the Taurus G3. Let's get to work. Today you've got more choices than ever for your carry conceal guns. And that leads to the great question on where you should spend your money. Should you go with the more expensive options? Should you go cheaper? Where is the golden sweet spot? Today we're going to take two of the cheaper options. We got the Canik TP9SF Elite. This gun goes for around $400 to $450. You can sometimes find it for a little bit less, but we're just going to call it $400-ish. And it comes with two mags, it's a 15-round capacity, and on the lower end of what I would consider acceptable self-defense. And its contender today is going to be the Taurus G3. The G3 here is a 15-round length frame. It does come with an additional 17-round mag. The Canik only comes with two 15-round mags. Feature-wise, the Taurus here has some pretty solid grip texturing, but not necessarily in all the right places. The texturing is aggressive enough to be able to hold the gun, but not overly aggressive, so you're not going to be hurting yourself. But it is missing the texture in around here up in the upper back strap. I usually like to see a little bit more up there, so this gives it a pretty slick feel way up here, meaning that it can slide around a little bit on the back of your hand. The trigger on the G3 is interesting. It's not a good trigger. We'll just start with that. The G3 does not have a good trigger. It is a larger trigger with a nice wide safety shoe in here, but it has a lot of movement. And when I say a lot of movement, I mean a lot of movement. We're talking about over ½ an inch of overall travel before you hit the wall. And then you do hit a hard wall. You pull through that hard wall. I'll have the trigger pull weight down here somewhere. I'm gonna say it's probably around 6 pounds or so, but all of that take up really makes it kind of a lackluster trigger. Reset on that trigger is about 3/16 of an inch out. It is audible, not very tactile, but it's not the worst trigger I've ever felt, but this thing just doesn't have a good trigger in it. Now, the thing that is nifty about this, it is a little bit gimmicky, is this trigger is actually second strike capable, meaning that once the striker drops, if the round doesn't go off, you can actually hit it again. You can actually pull it back and it'll drop the striker again. Very similar to a double action hammer fired gun where you can have the hammer fall again. Very similar to that. Now, how often are you going to run into a situation where that is actually going to help you? If you run quality stuff, almost never. But let's admit it, you're running a Taurus. Moving up from there, we have non-ambidextrous controls. They're all over here on the left-hand side of the gun. And then we've got sights. This one does have a Glock cut front, non-Glock cut rear. The rear sight is super weird in here. I still haven't fully figured out how this, it's slotted and then Allen keyed. It's weird. They're not great either. They're 3-dot white sights, and as I always say, 3-dot sights are the farce of the gun industry. Profile-wise, I've seen worse. Not like a whole lot worse, but I've seen worse. They're extremely low, which is nice and low snag, but it's not the best for actually shooting. Let's go ahead and shoot some shots through the G3 here. Then we'll switch over to the Canik and we'll talk about it a little bit. Okay, so now let's swap over to the Canik, my favorite gun that is like super high quality that I love to give crap because the Canik guys they go apeshit over it. So the Canik here is based off of a Walther design, and I'll tell you guys, it's good. It is a good, solid gun. Starting from the bottom again, my complaint as to the Canik TP9 has always been the grip and its texturing. The texturing is almost non-existent. You got kind of little nubbies on the front and back. They don't do a whole lot. The side panel grip is, well, it's basically aesthetic. And just the feel of the polymer in general on the TP9, and this is where people always get mad, it feels generic. It doesn't feel like as good of a gun as it actually is. It is a really good gun. It just doesn't feel as good. Now, that is not to say that this thing feels better, because it doesn't. The grip texturing is better on this one, but the frame on this one is also generic. And what I mean by generic is if you toss a TP9 in my hand or a Taurus in my hand, I may not be able to call out exactly what gun that is. You give me a Glock, you give me a CZ, you give me a Walther, I'm gonna know exactly what that gun is. Not so much with these. Now, the trigger. The trigger in the TP9 is, my opinion, the best stock striker-fired trigger that you can get. It is just amazing. The trigger guard is laughably gigantic, like cartoonishly huge. The trigger shoe is huge, but you cannot argue with the results of this trigger. About 3/8 of an inch of overall take-up, and then you've got a hard wall and an immediate break. The reset is that same over travel, which is about 1/8 of an inch, audible and tactile, right back on the wall, and again, that immediate break. It is just an excellent trigger, especially for a $400 gun, but honestly for any striker-fired gun. This is kind of the bar. Going up from there, we have ambidextrous slide stop slide release, non-ambidextrous mag release. We have slide serrations that the ones in the back are pretty good. The ones in the front are, I mean, they're there. They're not very big. There's not a whole lot to grab onto. Honestly, with a slide the size of this one, you're not even gonna get down to them. You're just gonna grab on somewhere up here. And then sitting on top of this thing is the other awesome part about this gun, and that is the sights. This gun comes with Warren Tactical sights. You've got a fiber optic front, a blacked out rear, and they are good to what the Taurus sights are bad. Let's go ahead and shoot some shots through the Canik here, and then we'll get to comparing the two. All right, so now we've talked about the features of the two. Let's go ahead and shoot them side by side and see how they compare there. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna shoot these side by side, one right after the other. When I'm done shooting, I'll give you guys a breakdown of exactly how each one of these shoots. So in shooting these, you can really tell the design kind of failure on the Canik here. The large slide and high bore of the Canik does lead to more muzzle flip than the G3 here. The grip on the Canik, however, is significantly more comfortable. It gives you a lot more confidence when you're first grabbing a hold of the gun that you know exactly where to put your hand. The Taurus here, because of the way that this back strap is, without any really defining movement in it, it's harder to really get a good idea of where that hand needs to be. And it's also easier to get too high on the Taurus and get up into slide bite area. That being said, the lack of muzzle flip from the Taurus, because it's got a little bit less reciprocating mass, actually works in its favor. The sights on the TP9 here are definitely better. I can hit longer targets better with the TP9, but the Taurus didn't do nearly as bad as I thought it was gonna do. Let's go ahead and do a timed run really quick between the two. We're gonna do 5 shots on 9-yard steel and 2 shots on 24-yard steel. We're gonna compare the times of the two, and then we'll come back for our final results. All right, 5 rounds on the 9-yard, 2 rounds on the 24-yard. Let's go. This is the Taurus G3. Okay, that is 401 with the Taurus. There you go for the naysayers. Now the Canik. All right, 368 on the Canik. All right, so final thoughts on the TP9 and the G3. So the $100 price difference between these two guns, I think, is worth it. When you're talking about price and how much more you want somebody to spend on a gun, you fall into the problem of how much more. Because if you're gonna go with $100 over the Taurus to get the Canik, what's another $100 to go with the Glock? What's another $100 to go with something else? But in this market, trying to stay under the $500 price range, consistent $500 price range, honestly, the Canik TP9 is one of the best guns that you can get in that segment. The Taurus, however, I will admit, did a lot better than I thought it was going to do. Controllability was a lot better. The trigger in use is a lot better. I did short stroke it just a little bit, not enough to really hurt me, obviously. But the Taurus, it can shoot, it can do the job, but for feel and reliability, I would just go Canik, and especially with the sights. As you saw, we had almost a half-second difference between the two guns, and I attribute every bit of that to the trigger and the sights on the Canik, because the Taurus, it feels a little bit more controllable in recoil, but it just doesn't necessarily convey all the time. So that's why it's important to really get a comparison of two guns side by side rather than feel one, feel the other, and see what your results are, because you may be surprised sometimes. So thanks guys for watching. If you found this video useful, do me a favor and like and subscribe down below. If you like what we do here on the channel and you want to help out a little bit, head over to workthetrigger.com. Over there you're going to find coupon codes, affiliate codes, links to our merch. You're going to find a link to our 3D printed gun accessories as well. If you like either one of these guns or you plan on getting one and you're looking for a holster for them, head over to harrysholsters.com and grab a Singleton, the most comfortable holster I have ever worn. Thanks guys for watching. Remember, I appreciate every one of you, and until next time, do your research, get informed, and get to work.